Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I have this little swatch and review of most of KBShimmer's I Keep on Falling collection. You might remember a couple of weeks ago Beyond Polish sent me Cirque's collection, but they also let me pick a couple of KBShimmer shades to try out, and I was tempted to try most of the fall shades, but I did also pick out my favorite from the summer collection. So as usual, I will save more of my thoughts for the end after some comparisons. For now, let me just show you the swatches. So starting with the fall collection, the first polish I have here is In A Pickle, which is a vibrant green multi-chrome that has a shimmer shifting from a golden yellow to green to blue in very extreme angles. As you saw, this had a really smooth, super even coverage formula. It was just so flawless to apply. I wouldn't call it a one coater by any means. I feel like multi-chromes are usually a little bit on the sheer side, so I found that I just needed a second coat to make it fully opaque. It's hard to tell underneath all of the shimmer, but I believe this has a very dark green base. Either way, it doesn't really matter too much because, of course, with multi-chromes, the star is the shimmer, which hopefully you can see is very shifty. I didn't have direct sunlight for these, but I feel like it does shine the best in lower or indirect lighting. Though you might be able to tell I'm kind of struggling getting the blue to show up on camera, but I could see it in real life. The next shade I picked out is It's Crunch Time, which is a autumn leaf inspired mix of metallic hex glitters in a clear base. So kind of your typical chunky glitter bomb polish. You can see the first coat is very full coverage. So I don't think this is a polish you need to sponge on to reach full opacity. It's not super base heavy, but as with a lot of chunky glitters, it can be a little finicky to apply, so using a sponge will soak up the base and just give you the most glitter coverage payoff. But I found it was pretty opaque in two coats. Maybe there were a couple of bald spots here and there, but it's really hard to see amongst all of the glitter. This has such a gorgeous mix of some different shades like gold, copper, red, and orange, and even some pops of green. Truly the most perfect fall glitter. As usual for my full hand swatches, I'm showing two coats with top coat, but I did throw on a glitter grabber since this is a very chunky polish, and I would also recommend a peel off base. I of course wanted to try out the multi-chrome magnetics. The first one here is called Heated Up, which is a black base that has a fiery multi-chrome shimmer that shifts from red head on to copper, orange, and gold in extreme angles, with some pops of green in like very, very extreme lighting. But for the most part, you see that really warm coppery color coming through. This had a super smooth, very pigmented formula that was maybe a little on the jelly side, so you could see some sheerness on the first coat, but I found it fully opaque for me in two coats, though again, depending on your nail length and application, you might still have some sheerness, but because it is a black base, I don't think a lot of people would need a third coat for this. And yeah, it looks really stunning with the cat eye effect, but I especially loved it with the velvet. I found that this was just super, super smooth. Maybe it doesn't look really impressive here under the live swatch portion, but for my full hand swatch, seeing it in natural lighting, I feel like it almost has that gel-like effect where it just looks so glassy and gemmy, just very, very dimensional, so stunning. I just really enjoyed this one. And the other multi-chrome magnetic is called Azure Wish, which is also in a black base, but it's the cooler toned magnetic with a shimmer that goes from a bright aqua to indigo to purple. And as expected, it has the same formula as the last polish, so it's a little on the jelly side, but very, very pigmented. So while there is a touch of sheerness on the first coat, I found that it built up to be fully opaque in just two. I guess I can see some people finding finding the formulas on these magnetics to be a little bit on the thicker side. I personally don't mind that at all. I usually am heavy-handed anyway, but I think with magnetics specifically, you kind of do want a thicker coat because it helps magnetize the polish a bit easier. So, you know, just as a heads up, maybe you might need some drops of thinner in the magnetics. But formula aside, I was just so floored with how the shimmer stood out in this polish. And even though I did say that this is in a black base, for some reason it leans a little bit blue to me, so I can't tell if it's just a really dark navy or if it's just the really strong multi-chrome shimmer that's so glowy it almost is tinting the base color. But either way, the magnetic shimmer in this is just so unreal. I wasn't expecting to love this one as much, where I would say that this one is my favorite because, as you might know, I'm always such a sucker for the fiery magnetic shimmers, but with how bright that aqua is and how it shifts to indigo and purple, I don't know, it's just so satisfying. So I really love this one. If anything, I would say to just be careful to not overwork the polish, because if you do a little too many brush strokes, you kind of end up seeing that on the nail, especially in the velvet effect. So just be a little mindful if you want to get the smoothest finish. And the last shade I picked out from the fall collection is Candy Dew Attitude, which is described as a raspberry jelly flake polish that has iridescent flakies in red and cobalt blue, as well as a black matte flaky. This had a really nice formula. As you can see, the jelly base is decently pigmented, so it is a little sheer, but it has really nice color to it. There's definitely a lot of flakies in this as well, so it can be a little finicky with application. You might need to dab or move around the flakies a little bit, but it does self-level really well, so I personally think this is fully opaque in just 2 coats, especially because it is so packed. It's hard to make out visible nail line. And yeah, I just loved the base color in this one. I'm not always a fan of matte black flakies added into a polish because it can be a little distracting, but I feel like this is such a fun Halloween kind of shade, and it just looks so glowy with those iridescent flakies. Similar to its crunch time, which was the glitter bomb, I would recommend a peel off base coat for this one, as well as a glitter grabber or just 2 layers of top coat, because a lot of the flakies can bunch up, so just to smooth it out. And the last shade I picked out is Ferris One Of All, which is from the Midway collection this past summer. This one is also described as a raspberry colored jelly, but it's definitely a much brighter shade of pink as opposed to the last shade, which was a little more magenta leaning. And this is another iridescent flaky bomb packed with shades of gold, indigo, crimson, green, copper, and pink. So even though the flaky mix is a little bit different than the last polish, I would say the formula felt pretty much the same, where the first coat is a little sheer jelly leaning but very pigmented in color, and it was pretty much fully opaque for me in 2 coats, or at least there's so many flakies it's hard to see any visible nail line. Of course, you could always do a 3rd coat or just use a blurring base, especially because this one is a little bit lighter than the last shade. But yeah, I feel like it's not a surprise that I had to choose this one. It is just so up my alley. I love how vibrant it is, and the flakies in this just glow, and some of them are super large too. And here are my full hand swatches of these assorted KBShimmer shades. I always love that KBShimmer does a variety of finishes, and it's just so satisfying even with the lineup of colors too. Moving on to comparisons, we're starting with In a Pickle, and this immediately reminded me of Mooncat's Serpents of Eden, which is another green multi-chrome kind of shade. But I noticed that In a Pickle almost had this sort of olivey undertone to it, and that made me think of Glisten&Glow's New Jersey Pine Barrens, which is a previous polish pickup shade. Unfortunately, the base in that one is just a bit too dark, and the shimmer is a little bit more sparse compared to the other 2, but it does have that same yellowy gold color, while Mooncat is more green head on. But in most other lighting, I would say Mooncat is the closest to this KB. Next for It's Crunch Time, this immediately reminded me of this oldie from my collection from Painted Polish called Campfire Cozy. It's another very autumnal glitter bomb kind of shade that's mainly orange and copper, but it does have some pops of red, so it is missing the gold and green. It's also in a slightly orange tinted base as opposed to a clear base, so they're not dupes. The only other glitters I thought to compare this to were from Holo Taco, including Zyler the Cat, which is the orange glitter, and Gold Play Button, which is the bright yellow gold. You can see its crunch time is maybe a little bit darker, so it has more of those copper glitters, but I figured I could still try to layer the Holo Taco shades just to see what that would look like, and unfortunately it's nothing close. Next for Heated Up, I knew I had to show this next to Cracked Polish's Scorchy, which was the recent magnetic topper. So I'm going to be layering that over black. And for an actual polish that's similar enough, I pulled out Fauve's Torment from the Frida Kahlo collection. That one is also in a black base, but it does have this extra reddish kind of shimmer in the background. So I would say that Scorchy is probably the closest to being a dupe if you layer it over black. But it doesn't have that same super smooth, gemmy kind of quality. But both the Cracked and Fauve do have the same exact magnetic pigment, so at least there's that. And lastly, here it is next to Mooncat's Dawn of the Empire from their Star Wars collab, which is another black base with this red, fiery, multi-chrome magnetic shimmer. And I would say that these are definitely the closest to being dupes. Like, they have the same descriptions, but I would say that the Mooncat shimmer is maybe a little bit more sparse or just not as finely milled as the KBShimmer. Moving on to Azure Wish, I first pulled out ILNP's 0 Degrees. Even though that is a blue-based magnetic, I thought the magnetic shimmer itself was closer to the KBShimmer. And for reference, I also pulled out Starrely's Oceanic Moonlight, which, similar to the ILNP, is a blue-based instead of a black base, so these are basically not dupes. Then for Candy Dew Attitude, I knew this was giving me similar vibes to some Mooncat shades, even though I knew they weren't going to be exact dupes by any means. So the first one I pulled out is Mood Ring, which is a red-toned purple jelly base that has these aqua and purple iridescent flakies. And I also pulled out Spaceoddity, which is a multi-chrome metallic flaky in a similar magenta kind of color to the KBShimmer. So on their own, they're not dupes, but they can get even closer if you do add a matte black flaky topper like Cracked Mascara Flakes, for example, to sort of recreate the vibe at least. And lastly, for Ferris One Of All, I knew I had to see this next to Mooncat's Forces of Evil, since that's the closest to being a potential dupe. That has a little bit more of a red-toned hot pink base, and the flakies are pretty much just in a blue and red color combination, so it's missing a lot of the yellowy gold, but I figured I could kind of add that with Holo Taco's Lunar Unicorn Skin, and I was kind of surprised at how close it was. It really is just a difference in the base color. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons of this little KBShimmer review. I really hope you don't mind that I don't have the full collections to review and that I just ended up picking my top favorites. I was really satisfied with these picks, so hopefully you enjoyed them as much as I did. Definitely would love to know if you already picked these up when they first launched or if they are going to be on your radar now for Black Friday. As a reminder, you can shop KBShimmer as well as so many other nail polish brands from Beyond Polish. I am also an affiliate with them, and I imagine you won't be able to stack my code with their Black Friday sale, but I will still have my affiliate link in the description box if you do want to shop through that, because that still will give me a small commission, which supports me and my channel. But even if you don't plan on grabbing anything, I still would love to hear your thoughts down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!